I was born in South India, and where you're born is sacred, important. And now I'm 70, I have a sense of why I was born in South India, of British parents, although my father had some Indian blood. And the deepest reason is, I think, that I was meant to uncover and decipher through grace the great mystery of South India. And that is that South India has been the sacred furnace in which multiple intercoherent visions of divinization have been experienced and transmitted over many centuries.
Everyone in exaltation, praying for grace and so grateful. The cat's so happy that it's doing yoga. The grace has come, and it's always here.
I came back to India after 15 years of absence, going through the concentration camp of reason, as I called it, the so-called Western education, when I was 25. And although I was very moved and attracted to the great sights of northern India, it was only when I came back to South India that my mind started to explode, and I had a series of overwhelming mystical experiences which forever changed the course of my life.
Don't be afraid. If the mountain falls, God will stop it. Look what God is doing for you. God is doing that in so many ways all the time.
And over the course of my life, I've understood three things which all intermingle in South India and in this trip. I've understood that the world is now in the throes of a massive evolutionary dark night crisis, and I understood that early. I've understood too that the only way through for myself and for, I believe, the rest of humanity is to connect at the very deepest mystical level with the self that transcends the ego, the self that embraces all of reality, the divine self that's celebrated in the Upanishads and known by all the great mystics of humanity. And thirdly, I've understood that you limit the power of this realization of the self if you think of it only as a passive one, as a transcendent state of awareness. It is also, and this is what South India knows, it's also dynamic. It also transforms and transmutes and transfigures absolutely everything in the human being, including the body. So what South India gave me over many, many years of revisiting it and traveling it alone and meditating in the temples and living by the sea in Mahabalipuram, what South India gave me was a template for the birth of an embodied divine humanity. And I'd chosen these particular sites in a particular order so that anyone who comes on this trip with an open mind and open soul will experience from different sides this template and realize that, terrifying though the events of our time are, there is a way through. And that way through has been known by the great mystics of South India. And that way through has been experienced here. There's something in the land itself and in the great mystical traditions that have flowered in this land and in the passion of the Tamils for God that has kept vibrant and alive this dynamic evolutionary vision of infinite possibility that I think is absolutely essential now for the future of the planet. In many ways, South India is the last great intact mystical culture. So let me just sketch why the particular sites that I've invited people to visit are so sacred to me, and I believe when you experience them in the order that I've worked on for 40 years to get as exact and as precise as possible, why this particular visit and these sites in this order are so revelatory. We start in Mahabalipuram because, for very strange reasons, Mahabalipuram has been the center of my mystical life. I've never really understood it, except that I feel I must have had some kind of past life link with the Pallavas that created Mahabalipuram. We start there because in the rock temples of Mahabalipuram, the great enlightened Pallava kings showed us the golden leaves carved out of golden rock of the golden book of an embodied divine humanity, showed us, especially in the great sculpture of the rock of the descent of the Ganges, what a completely integrated divine humanity would look like and how it would be related to the whole creation in great joy and great sacred responsibility. And this vision is overwhelmingly positive, overwhelmingly healthy, overwhelmingly radiant.
And in the way in which she's represented, you have a whole teaching beyond words on how the powerful feminine works. It works with enormous precision, but without malice, without rage, without even judgment. It is defending life, and what has to be destroyed has to be destroyed, but there is nothing, there's no emotion in that. There's just, you don't have emotion when you weed a garden. You take the weed out.
And the most important aspect to me is the marriage of the masculine and feminine that you see in these sculptures. A very powerful, robust, radiant, but elegant masculine, and a very powerful, robust, and deeply passionate and sensual feminine. So that first burst of glory that you experience in Mahabalipuram, we then take and we go from that ancient vision of the integration of humanity with the cosmos directly to Pondicherry, where the greatest evolutionary philosopher of all time, Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo, worked out with the mother in meticulous scientific detail, by living it himself, the stupendous birth that I believe is the real deep meaning of the mystical crisis that we're going through, the evolutionary crisis that we're going through. In going to Aurobindo's tomb and really experiencing the vast dynamic peace that radiates from that tomb, and in plunging into some of the major aspects of Aurobindo's absolutely revelatory philosophy, those who take the trip are given a direct sense of how the vision that exploded with such simple, powerful grace in Mahabalipuram lived on and then was reimagined and reinterpreted at the highest intellectual and spiritual level by Aurobindo for our time. And as we go from Mahabalipuram to Aurobindo, I introduce people to the stupendous tradition of mystical passion of the Tamil saints that worshipped Shiva, the saints that people like Appar and Kampantar and Kuntarar, the three great ones, and later, of course, the great Manikavashaga. And I also introduced them to in some ways the greatest of them all, a man called Tirumula, who lived in the 8th century, who wrote a book called the Tirumantiram, which is the most astounding book about the birth of the divine human through the worship of Shiva, especially the golden Shiva of Chidambaram, the golden Shiva, Nataraja Shiva, the dancer. So in that transition from Mahabalipuram to Aurobindo, I seeded this other great tradition that also recognizes the astounding possibilities that reside in being a human being, the possibilities of being transmuted totally into a living divine human. And that prepares everyone for the central crown jewel, in the sense, of the whole journey, where we go to the place where Shiva the dancer has been worshipped with infinite passion for 1,400 years, Chidambaram. And we experience the wild, gorgeous passion of the rituals that celebrate the golden dancer in the heart of the temple, the tiny heart, the Chitsava, where the most sacred image of Shiva in India in many ways resides. I've spent a lot of time over the years in Chidambaram, and it is infinitely sacred to me, and I've had very close friendships with mystics who lived in Chidambaram, including one who was a very advanced young priest who befriended me, and after testing me said, you know, the great secret of Chidambaram is that by worshipping the golden Shiva, you become the golden Shiva, just as Tirumala had said in the 8th century, and just as Apar and Kampantar and Kuntara had suggested in their glorious devotional poems. So that gives people a direct initiation into God as the dynamic dancer of evolution, and a direct initiation into that core sacred vision that has been so profound in the history of the Tamil language and the history of the Tamil people, and continues to be so vibrant and so alive. And after reeling out of Chidambaram, we visit a culture in which enlightened kings who identified with Shiva Nataraja and the Golden One created a golden world, Tanjore, especially the temple and the Chola bronzes. And I try and convey to people two things. I try to convey to people that the great temple of Tanjore, which is unique in India, is in the very stone from which it's created and with the coherence and majesty with which its architecture radiates, is itself a representation of the divine human. When you enter into that vast temple, just as when you enter into Luxor, as Shvala Lubitsch has made so clear in his amazing work on Egypt, you're not just entering into a place which celebrates the divine with unbelievable intensity, you're entering into a place which is organized as a living initiation into your own divine capacity and possibility. You're entering into your own cosmic person that is one with Shiva. And in the Chola bronzes, I've tried to help people see you have an artistic representation of infinite grace and elegance, the greatest we've ever been given, of what the divine human is. And there's one bronze in particular that I really invite people to contemplate, and that's the matchless bronze of Shiva seeming to lean on air, but actually it's because the bull was removed, but you can see that this is both the god and a Tamil peasant, because he's wearing the headdress of a Tamil peasant, and that is such an overwhelming statement in art of the highest quality of the human and the divine being absolutely intermingled, and of Shiva revealing his divinity in a human being and through a human being. So Tanjore grounds and expands and makes palpable through the stupendous illumined art of the Cholas this ancestral evolutionary vision. And then we go to the ashram of Father Bede. Father Bede Griffiths was my soul's father and my beloved, and the being who completely changed my life, because he led me back to authentic Christianity and showed me in his own living example that the core message of Christ is not about adoring Christ as the Son of God and thinking of yourself as a pathetic worm that needs constant grace to evolve, but that the authentic message was that Jesus came to announce to us our own divinity and show us the way to it, and show us the way not just to experiencing divine consciousness, but to experiencing what Father Bede was experiencing when I knew him, because he told me about it. The living transfiguration process, the turning to gold, that Tirumala had celebrated, that Aurobindo had celebrated, that the great sculptors of Mahabalipuram had represented, but was now being lived by this astonishing man within the deepest terms of the Christian revelation. And for many people who have been profoundly wounded by Christianity and repulsed by the fanatical or demented versions of it, coming into Father Bede's presence, which is still there, although he left his body in 1993, is an extraordinary experience. And what I try always to give through my own inner experience of Bede to people is the great secret maps that he transmitted to me about our time. And fundamentally, Bede knew from his own inmost prophetic, mystical understanding that a shattering dark night was coming soon, and it would look like the end and feel like the end, but that the deepest potential within it was of a completely new humanity being born out of great tragedy, but also out of great hunger to be initiated at the deepest levels into the deepest imaginable mystical truths. And when those two things came together, he said that a second coming would come, and it wouldn't be the return of an avatar, a Star Wars avatar. It would be the rising of the golden yeast of divine love consciousness in millions of people that would enable humanity to co-create with the divine a new race and a new world, a new way of being and doing everything. And after that, we end the trip at the sacred mountain, Arunachala, where the greatest Indian sage for the last 1,000 years in many ways, Ramana Maharshi, lived out his completely simple and completely extraordinary life. I have a personal connection with Ramana because my father was a policeman in charge of South Arcot, and at the time Ramana was living, so knew him and was loved by him and loved him back. So I feel that so much of my own inner life has been blessed by Ramana. And we end here for three reasons, really. The first is that many of the great Tamil mystics who experienced transfiguration, the turning to gold that is graced by the dancer, lived on this mountain and worked in silence with different techniques, including alchemical techniques, which they used different minerals and very complex techniques, worked with those techniques to become divine human beings. That's the first reason. The second reason is that the mountain is Shiva's firelingam. I've seen that. Many mystics have seen it. I mean, with my open eyes, I've seen the mountain transform into that flame lingam. So I know that the power of that fire is infinite. And bringing everything that we've learned on this initiatory journey into these different streams of evolutionary transformation, bringing them into the beginnings of an inner coherence in the presence of this mountain that is at once supremely still and supremely wildly dynamic, as God is, because the mountain, for those who have been initiated, is a living emblem, a living emanation of God. That initiation is very holy and transformative. And the last reason is because of Ramana himself. Many people think of Ramana as someone who taught a purely transcendental path, a path of dropping the world and going into the light and living as the self in a non-dual way, but not in an evolutionary way. But I don't feel that at all about Ramana. My experience of Ramana is twofold. On the one hand, he gives the peace beyond understanding, which comes from total realization of the transcendent self. And the other is that for those who have the eyes to see, Ramana is himself a divine human being, the sign that such a majestic transfiguration is possible, because he lived in the body and radiated this grace for 70 years, 50 years of which he was enlightened and transforming the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, and that he continues to do that great, nameless, wordless work of transmutation everywhere. So I see this last stage of the journey as a stage in which we can be given, through his grace and through the grace of the mountain, the foundation of deathless peace, which will enable us to do the great, holy, sometimes very grueling and difficult work of being transformed into divine human beings. Without that foundation of peace and without that initiation into the transcendent self that Ramana gives so effortlessly to those who open to him, without that, this great adventure that we're on of trying to align with the deep evolutionary will of the divine to birth a new humanity simply can't be done. And I end the journey here because I'm so aware that people who've been on this journey have been shaken up in the most glorious ways. They've been through these multiple initiations from all sides. But here, in the silence of Ramana, in the silence of Tiruvannamalai, in the absolute dynamic peace that the mountain radiates, they can experience the grace which begins to align all the experiences that they've been through and make them start to activate a great transformation that will continue when they return, when we return to the wild, wild West. So that's just a little bit about what this journey is for me. And it's the most important journey I ever could take people on. And it's been the central journey of my life, a journey I've done again and again and again, like a pianist that plays the Bach fugues again and again and again, because I know it contains the secret of everything. And as I grow older, it becomes more amazing, more profound. And I really believe that anyone who comes on this journey with an open heart will receive information and divine grace and very helpful, illumined concepts that will enable them to participate in this birth that's happening in the middle of the death. In a time of horror, we need to be able to celebrate with total abandon our lives, the nature of the soul, the nature of our divine identity, the great gift that we've been given as human beings to evolve beyond our wildest imagination through grace. So the great antidote to the vast no that is erupting in danger and horror all over the planet is the vast yes that was born here in South India and still is so unbelievably alive. And it's to experience and soak in the golden waters of that great yes that I've invited people on this trip and will continue to so long as I'm alive.